Hello, welcome to Clarity and Brevity. Today I'm joined by Greg Beale, G.K. Beale, and we're going to discuss the letter of Colossians. Dr. Beale has written this commentary here with Baker, Colossians and Philemon, and the Baker exegetical commentary on the New Testament. So we're going to talk about some of the issues related to this important letter. So Greg, thanks for joining me.
Well, it's good to be here.
Well, let's jump right in, and let's just start at the beginning. Tell me who wrote Colossians and why that might be a question of interest or a question of debate.
Well, a number of people may not know. A lot of people who teach or students would know that scholars question the authorship of Colossians. Not Philemon, though. They all agree Philemon that Paul wrote Philemon. But many think that Paul did not write Ephesians, nor Colossians, nor the pastoral epistles, 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus, and a number of them question 2nd Thessalonians. So the others are considered to be the authentic Pauline epistles: Romans, 1st Corinthians, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, Philemon. So many think that Paul did not write Colossians, and a lot of the reasons they give are the same reasons they give for why they doubt the other epistles usually. For example, they think, well, Paul used a different vocabulary. And again, as I say, these same reasons are used for doubting the other epistles that I mentioned. But an interesting statistic is that they would say, look, there are a lot of once occurring words in Colossians that you don't find them elsewhere in Paul's epistles. And so that points maybe that to the idea that Paul didn't write it. But when you really look into that carefully, there are about 87 once occurring words in Colossians. And if you take one of the accepted Pauline epistles like Philippians, it has 79 once occurring words in comparison with the other accepted Pauline. So, that's not too different. And so I think that argument is a little bit diluted and by those kind of statistics. And then some think that he has a different syntax. The way he composes his sentences are different from the way he does in the accepted Pauline epistles. But on both those counts, both with regard to vocabulary, with regard to syntax, other aspects of writing style, one of the things that's interesting is we've had some stylistic mathematicians do some calculations about how much data do you need to be able to establish what a writing style is. And the amount of Pauline literature that we have, the way they've reduced it, that is not at all enough of a database to determine what someone's style is. You need much, much more of a body of writings than just what we have with those traditional 7 accepted Paulines. And so, you have to be careful saying, oh, this is Paul's style, etc. We're not completely sure what his style was. And furthermore, when you think about it, I mean, if you were to look at something I wrote when I was in my 20s, let's say, and now I'm a little older than that. I've taught for about 45 years or so. And so if you were to look at my writing style now, it's quite different. And so, you can even have reasons for difference of writing style due to stages in a career, or it could be that a particular pastoral situation demands different vocabulary than another pastoral situation. And we can even add to that the authors in the ancient world used secretaries, and we know that Paul used secretaries from Romans. He used Tychicus, and or was it Tertius?
Tertius, yeah.
Tertius, and Peter used Silvanus, And so we know there were secretaries. Well, all of a sudden, then you have to study secretaries and their habits. And we know from Cicero there were at least two types of dictation that secretaries adapted themselves to. One was syllable by syllable. Another was segment by segment. Now, if it was segment by segment, then you've got a little liberty for a secretary to perhaps compose the essence of the thought and not give the word for word. And of course, if that were the case with Paul, we know it's not a problem because he would have read these letters and would have made sure that what's being sent out is what he wanted sent out. So that's not a problem if it's a secretary that's doing that broader sort of work. But it does allow for perhaps a different style, even a different vocabulary. So secretarial help could be a reason for that. And there's an interesting event that happened in my life that speaks to this whole issue. A fellow by the name of Harold Honer, one of my professors in seminary, he came to Cambridge when I was there on a study leave. And we have a New Testament seminar. Cambridge sponsors, the Divinity School sponsors a New Testament seminar every 2 weeks. And so he came and was giving one of the papers for this particular seminar that I attended that day. And it was on why Paul did not write Galatians. And he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the typical arguments against Colossians and Ephesians and the pastoral epistles. I'm going to take that criteria. I'm going to apply it to Galatians. And he took every criteria, vocabulary, writing style, theology, and so on. And what he found was that Paul didn't write Galatians because a number of these showed that he was too unique in comparison with the other accepted Paulines. And so it was really a big joke. At the end, he said, of course I accept Galatians, but this has been done to show how tenuous these criteria are. And just to give one example, in Colossians, one of the reasons it's doubted that Paul wrote it is because a difference of theology. And one of the things mentioned, there are several, but one of the ones that are prominent is that Paul has, or the writer of Colossians has an already and not yet eschatology. And the other epistles, he mainly has a futuristic eschatology. Well, that's just outright absurd. I mean, his letters, Romans, First Corinthians, Second Corinthians, onwards, they're all shot through, saturated with already and not yet eschatology. So that's one of the most embarrassing criteria that have been proposed. So, and if Paul didn't write it, and it was by someone else taking the name of Paul, and there are some evangelicals that hold that and still hold to an heresy somehow, because it does say, Paul wrote this. But they would say, well, there was this kind of a accepted genre style of writing at the time, but we just don't have examples of a pseudepigraphical genre. There are a few examples of such letters, but even those are a little suspect. And so, for example, the letter of Aristeas is not what you would call a typical pseudonymous letter. So, I don't think you can say there was a genre. And furthermore, in Colossians is a good example. At the end of Colossians are all these personal instructions. And the same at the end of 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. And why these personal instructions? They would all have to be made up. And then all of a sudden you have to say, oh, well, because many want to say these pseudepigraphical authors are not deceptive. But on the other hand, that would be quite a deception if they're making up all this personal material. So those are just some reflections on why I think that it's likely just to accept what Paul says at the beginning, where he says, Paul, an apostle of Christ by the will of God, Timothy, our brother, et cetera, et cetera. So, that may be an indication that Timothy was his secretary, by the way.
Yeah, and
So,
if you're not used to noticing this, it's amazing how often Paul mentions other people there in the greetings with his letters.
yeah,
It's not just Paul doing this solo, but he's got coworkers.
yeah. I
Right.
mean, maybe they're the letter carriers, or there are a lot of different theories, but I think secretarial is one of the best.
I think you were also maybe alluding to the last verse of Colossians where he says, "This is my greeting," Paul in his own hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Yeah.